Today, during the 11-11-11, the first speaker is Stephen Mehler. He is, you can say, one of the people who, at this moment, belongs to the leading group of crystal skull scientists. He has been studying crystal skulls, for those who are still active, the longest of all. So it's felt as very, let's say, right, as far as things are right, to let him open as a speaker because of his experiences. He has, as an archaeologist and as a crystal skull researcher, he has a pretty unique way of looking at crystal skulls. And we have had our differences. That's why we appreciate each other so much, because we learn through the differences. And he was telling me that I would enjoy this particular presentation. So you may understand that I'm really curious about this presentation. So I really like to introduce to you Stephen Mehler. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is.
Thank you, Jaap. Happy 11/11 to all of you. And happy Veterans Day. To any of you men and women who have served or are serving, we bless and honor you. So I'm here with a limited time frame to try to explain to you what are ancient crystal skulls, or try to clear up some of the confusion that has happened around us. First of all, I have to say something which is important to pass information. As you know, we are gathered 11/11/11 in many places around the world today. There are actually at least 5 other crystal skull conferences that I know of going on around the world at this time, in different parts of the world. Not only that, there are 11/11/11 ceremonies all around the world at sacred sites, but not in Egypt. And I need to explain this to you all, because it is a lesson for us all. I know of at least 3 groups I was going to come up here and say who are going to be in the Great Pyramid today. As you know, those of you who don't know me, I am an alternative Egyptologist. I lead tours to Egypt. I've been going to Egypt for the last 19 years. I had an Egyptian teacher who I will speak a little bit about. But 3 groups that I knew of, I was actually going to be telling you that, well, first of all, when I first heard of this conference, when Kendall said we were going to do 11/11/11, I told everyone, well, I'm going to be speaking at 11/11/11 at 11 a.m. Well, it's 11:30. We're just a little off. But I was going to be coordinating with a group that I knew personally that was going to be in the Great Pyramid in about 2 hours from now to join with us. But I want you to understand something, and it is one of our lessons here today. We're all here to deal with ego. Ego is the great lesson of the human condition. So there was a group from Switzerland, a spiritual group, who wanted to rent the Great Pyramid today just for themselves, and not allow anyone else to go in all day. A spiritual group. So because of the conflict, and because there was a complaint that some fundamentalists may cause some trouble today about that, the Ministry of Antiquities canceled all programs today. The Giza Plateau is closed. No groups are going in the Great Pyramid. Don't say, oh, because what is happening is my indigenous family in Egypt is going to go up on the Giza Plateau. It's going to be the local people who understand what it's all about, who don't do it for profit or for profit motive, and it's going to be a spiritual ceremony anyway. So, the idea about what is an ancient crystal skull. There are 2 camps on this. As we know today, we live in a world of extreme polarity. Politically, economically, philosophically today. Well, one camp that has been guided by a few academic anthropologists, led by Dr. Jane Walsh of the Smithsonian Institute, who have tested a few crystal skulls, and we're going to talk about that test. And as Jaap said, he's real curious to hear what I have to say. Well, Jaap passed some very significant information to me right before my presentation. And it deals with the testing that the Smithsonian Institute did, and we'll discuss that. So that group tested, they did some what we call cast molding on the teeth to see if they could find evidence of rotary tool marks, diamond tools. They used a scanning electron microscope. Under a scanning electron microscope, supposedly you can determine the cut, how a skull has been carved. If you see these straight cut lines that go on forever, they believe that means the skull has been machined, and it is modern. I will tell you a much better way to determine that a skull is machined without having to use a scanning electron microscope. But, so then they have made the statement that all the crystal skulls are fakes. Now, those of you that heard me on Coast to Coast with George Norrie, and he talked about the other camp. The other camp on the other side is what we call the Ancient Aliens crowd. They have proffered this urban legend that there were 13 original crystal skulls that have come from extraterrestrial source that are here on this planet to gather before 2012. Now I tell you folks, as I said to George Norrie, I have real difficulty with the word original. Original. What does that mean? Are we talking million years, 10 million, 50 billion, trillion years ago? What does that mean? Original. Also have trouble with the word fake. I tell you that I personally believe of the two camps, the truth lies somewhere in between. And we'll discuss that. Because there is an extraterrestrial connection, but there is a terrestrial connection, which has not been known. And that's why we have brought our venerated elders here from traditions. For these anthropologists to say that crystal skulls are fakes is to deny all these people that are sitting here. Of the cultures that we have studied, the Mayan, the Aztec, and the Olmec cultures venerate the symbol of skull, not meaning death, as it does in the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, but meaning eternity, infinity, infinity. So if they have this tradition, and this tradition is so old, how could it be that the Mayans did not carve crystal skulls? Or the Olmec, which is what I believe. And so how could they be called fakes? No, understand this. And this is where I'm going to try to clear up as much of this confusion, because honestly, I have been a part of the confusion as much as anyone. People have misunderstood what I've been saying about the extraterrestrial, about what ancient means. Let's make this understood, and it has to do a lot with what Yap presented for us. I quote from the two great masters who taught me. As Yap said, by a matter of default, because I'm 66 years old, I am now considered one of the senior researchers in the field. But it's because of the two who taught me, the two greatest men I ever knew in the field, Dr. Marcel J. Vogel and Mr. F.R. Nick Nocerino. I learned everything from them, how to work with crystal and what crystals mean. And Mr. Nocerino would say, the more he studied crystal skulls, the less he knew about them. So this idea of what's a fake. Is it a quartz crystal? Yes. Then it's not fake. And Nick said to us, all crystal is ancient. All crystal has power and energy, can transfer energy. We virtually have the 20th century because of the silicon chip industry, because of what quartz can do. So all quartz is ancient. Understand that all the crystal you're seeing in this room, at least 1,000, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years to form under great heat and pressure. If those of you who ever saw the National Geographic special where they went into the Crystal Cave in Mexico, where you saw these 50-foot to 100-foot geodes, it was abominably hot in there, and a human being could not last more than 5 minutes in this cave. Tremendous heat to create these skulls. So understand, all crystal is ancient. All crystal can store energy. All crystal can transfer energy. All crystal can be used for healing. All crystal. So why are we obsessed with this idea of ancient crystal skulls? It's a very simple understanding. Mr. Nocerino was the one who, and again, you're going to hear people write to me all the time saying, well, aren't the only ones who tested these things the British Museum and the Smithsonian Institute? Absolutely not. But I'm going to talk about their testing. Mr. Nocerino founded in 1944 in New York City the Society of Crystal Skulls International. He reestablished it in California in 1945. Up until his passing in 2004, it was the oldest and most respected scientific organization testing crystal skulls in the world. So understand, this man tested hundreds of crystal skulls, if not thousands. And he said to me personally that he documented 15 to 18 skulls that he classified as ancient. So where does the 13 come in? If he tested 15 to 18, the skulls we have in the room, people write to me, isn't Max number 13? Well, is Shannara 2? Is Einstein 4? Is Synergy 7? I mean, what does that mean? It means nothing. I'll explain that at the end. But the idea is that Mr. Nocerino gave us the classifications that we work with on a scientific basis. He classified what he called a contemporary crystal skull, one that has been carved from a piece of crystal into a skull shape within the last 50 to 100 years. And that's the overwhelming majority of the skulls that you see. In fact, I tell you quite honestly, the overwhelming majority of skulls which have been called ancient are really modern. But then there is a gray area, what we call a skull that's been carved between 100 and several hundred years old. Many of the ones that are called ancient crystal skulls are actually old, a few hundred years old. Mayans were carving skulls. Aztecs were carving skulls. Again, if anthropologists say they don't exist, why can't you go into a museum in Mexico City and you will see rows of skulls, small skulls, that have been taken from Aztec tombs? So there we have what we call provenance. Provenance. Provenance is the key word for you guys to understand because it has to do with what we're talking about, ancient crystal skulls. Provenance means, from an archaeological sense, you're in an excavation. You uncover an artifact that is recorded. Everyone in the expedition dates it, records it, witnesses the event. Then where that skull moves to a museum or to private hands is documented. Paperwork is involved. That is called provenance. That rarely exists with any ancient crystal skull. Understand, many of these crystal skulls you're seeing have been uncovered from tombs in the early 20th century. We see some in the teens, in the 20s, in the 30s, are the stories that go, that they've been taken out of Mayan tombs or even Olmec tombs in this time period. But these are not documented excavations. Understand, there's no provenance. So therefore, the academics can't deal with it because it's not recorded. But it is the majority of the stories about these ancient skulls is that they have come from tombs, mostly associated with Mexico and Central America. However, you're going to hear stories today, and more of these stories are being documented, of crystal skulls coming from all around the world, from Peru, from Tibet, and maybe from Africa. I'm supposed to investigate a crystal skull that may come from ancient Egypt. I have my doubts, but we'll see. So, the ancient crystal skulls, the difference is that they were carved as a skull over 1,000 years ago. But understand that. In that rubric, in that categorization, we have layers. In other words, I'm going to show you maybe a crystal skull that is 1,001 years old. But maybe Einstein is well over 100,000 years old. Who knows? Maybe Shannara is over 10,000 years old. So there's layers upon layers. We think there were sets of 13. 13 is the key number. Again, we're talking about the convergence of cycles now. This is why we're here. The Mayans speak of 3 great cycles now, a 5,000-year cycle, a 13,000-year cycle, and a 26,000-year cycle. The ancient Egyptians talk about a 5,000-year cycle, and we're coming to the end of a 65,000-year cycle. So all indigenous people all over the planet are saying we are coming to the convergence of cycles now. This is why we gather. This is why the skulls were created. The ancient skulls were created by very powerful ancient shamans who put their intent into the skull. That is the difference. That's what I look for. That's why Nick Nocerino, were obsessed with the ancient skulls. Because the intent of the carver. You look at these ancient skulls. Your modern contemporary skulls are polished, machined, and I'll show you how we can determine that. And they are for sale. They're to look beautiful. They're aesthetic, nice, finely polished. You look at the ancient skulls and they look ugly. They're crudely carved out of maybe not the perfect choice of quartz, but the choice of quartz was by the person who chose the vibrational energy of the stone. They were chosen to be shamanic talismans, tools for healing, for transferring energy. These ancients knew that they would put their energy, their knowledge into these skulls for us now. That's why the ancient skulls are important. And let me tell you, it doesn't make a difference or not. This is what Yap wanted to hear me say. It doesn't make a difference if you're around ancient skulls, modern skulls, or new skulls. Because what happens, it happens to be a law of physics and chemistry that a higher concentration always seeks a lower concentration to seek homeostasis, to seek balance. A high energy source will always pass energy to a lower energy source. Everything in nature seeks a balance, a harmony, never reaching it, of course, but seeking homeostasis, balance. So all the ancient skulls are constantly downloading, constantly downloading. It doesn't make a difference if you buy a skull that was carved as a skull last week. When it leaves this conference this weekend, it will have ancient skull energy in it. Every piece of jewelry you're wearing, that if it's crystal, is going to carry that energy. So that's the meaning. But the ancient skulls were programmed to be here now, to bring back the knowledge of the ancient people. That's why we honor our venerated indigenous elders who've come from all different indigenous traditions, because they know the tradition's been passed down to them. And why are the Mayans speaking now when for years they distrusted because of Archbishop Landa and the Catholic Church who almost destroyed the culture? Why? Why are indigenous elders, Native Americans who would never talk to white people, are now passing their wisdom? It is the time. So let's take a look at some of these skulls that they're still playing around here. Okay. Okay. First skull. Okay. Okay, so let's keep talking. I first got involved with crystal skulls in 1979. I was working as a staff research scientist for the Rosicrucian Order in San Jose, California. A gentleman, a Mexican-American who was living in San Jose named John Zamora, approached us in the Rosicrucian Research Department with some photographs of an object that he was trying to work with some Mayans, he said, in Mexico, to bring these objects here to sell because they needed money to feed their villages, etc. I'd be lost without her. And so he brought photographs of us. It's my first time I saw anything or learned anything about a crystal skull was November 1979. And the photograph was of a skull which they're showing on the wall right now, which Nick Del Sereno named the Mayan crystal skull. Why? Because his students all saw Mayan scenes in it. Okay. So this was it. So we arranged in January of 1980, John Zamora brought this skull in. He was working as an agent for a man named Francisco Reyes. Francisco claimed he was a Mayan priest and was bringing these objects in. Nick thought that they were sort of sophisticated tomb robbers. But whatever, they brought the skulls in. So I got to see this skull, got to work with this skull. Amazing skull. A lot of energy, a lot of interesting things about this skull. Some things I want you to look at because it's going to be important. We're going to return to it later. There's indentations on the side. There's a certain number of crystal skulls who carry this trait. Indentations on the side. The particular way the jaw is and the teeth are and the shape of the eyes. Very significant. Take a good look at it. So this skull enabled me to first meet Dr. Marcel J. Vogel, senior scientist, chemist at IBM, one of the outstanding people in the world who knew about crystal. He actually got his PhD in liquid phosphors and crystals. He was the crystal man at IBM. He also was a Rosicrucian. That's where I connected with him. So I got to work with Marcel and watch him work with the skull. He declared the skull a language decoder. What does that mean? Well, if any of you guys are sensitive enough, and I'm not trying to put a value judgment on those who can't see this, but you can actually see crystal skulls talk to each other if you can get in that state, especially when two ancient skulls get together. It's electronic pulses. And they talk to each other. So as I understand it, as Marcel was explaining this, say I'm with this skull, and one of my Mayan elder brothers or sisters is here talking to me in Spanish, which I'm not fluent in, or in Quiche, or Lacondan, or Yucatec, which I know nothing about. This skull would take their language that they're speaking, transfer it into electronic pulses. Those electronic pulses would go into my brain, and I'd hear it in English. The original Star Trek language decoder. Where is Yoshi? We need her now. And I could verify that because there was an incident when Francisco Reyes and I were having a discussion, and I was going through the translator of John Zamora, And I asked Mr. Reyes, did the Mayan ever practice human sacrifice? And he said something in Spanish. John translated to me and said, no. He said the Mayans didn't often, or he said something like that. I said, no, John. What he said was the Mayans never practiced animal or human sacrifice. And he said, how did you know that? You don't speak Spanish. Came right into my head. And Francisco did that. He was what we call a mentalist. He could telepath. So this skull, I saw this skull. I tested this skull. We had many Rosicrucians come in, test this skull, work with it. Clearly, we worked what we determined through Marcel Vogel and later. This is when I first heard the name Nick Nocerino, was in 1980, around this skull. Because it was told to me that Mr. Nocerino was the one who was arranging for this skull to come into the States. And he had worked with it for 3 months in his group, and then it was turned over to me. So I first heard the name Nick Nocerino. And in 1980, I got a flyer, which I still have in my possession, which is in the book that I have, which is still a very important document to me. It was a flyer that announced a crystal skull lecture in Belmont, California in March of 1980 called The Mystery of the Crystal Skulls by Mr. F.R. Nick Nocerino. It was the first time a public lecture on crystal skulls was ever given in the United States. March of 1980 in Belmont, California. So I knew the name. I did not meet the man until several years later. But I worked with the skull. We got tremendous information in the skull. We did psychometry, which you know is working with an object and trying to get impressions, and we document. We did it scientifically, based on the work of J.B. Ryan at Duke University, the father of parapsychology. You would take a person, let them get their impressions of the skull. They would never be present at anybody else's session. You would have them record a questionnaire, what impressions they see, colors, sounds, et cetera, and then you'd put all these things together and see if you get significant hits. In parapsychology, anything over than 50% is considered statistically significant. It's not by accident. So we would get 80% people hearing jungle sounds, 80% of people seeing Mayan scenes, et cetera, et cetera. So that was significant. And that's how we would work with the skulls. And this is parapsychology, scientifically testing. So I was very happy I got to work with this skull, very satisfied, got to know about him. If I never saw another one, great. But then again, John Zamora contacted me after I stopped working with the Rosicrucian Order and said that Francisco was back and he had another skull. Would I love to see it? Well, does the Pope in the woods and is the bear Catholic? You know. So I'm going to need you guys to move on. So in November 1979, I was contacted by John Zamora, and there was another crystal skull. We need to move to the second slide. Okay, this is another slide. What we found when we work with these skulls, there are 3 things, Nick Nocerino taught this too, that really activate crystal skulls. There are many things, but 3 things in particular: light, color, and sound. Again, what the sound ceremony we did this morning, beautiful Imani, has activated all the crystals in the room. Chanting with your skulls, wonderful. Love music, they love sound. Sound activates skulls, light and color. So we did, what we had was a monochronometer. We actually could hit the skulls with pure color, and certain colors the skull liked, certain colors she didn't like. She didn't like red, boy, she got very angry. But green she liked, blue she liked, purple she liked. And when we saw purple, it did something to us. Wow, is there a purple skull? That's the next slide. 1983. November 1982, I got to see this skull, which we call the amethyst crystal skull, because it's amethyst. Now, some of you may have heard a term Ami given to this skull. I did not give this name, so I don't use this name, but it is the same skull we're talking about. Get it back up. That one? No, next one. That. Leave it. Okay. Now, I want you to notice things about this skull. Same indentations in the side. It's coming from the same Mayan priest. He said it didn't come. The first skull, he told us, was excavated in 1912 in the province of San Agustin, near the Mayan city of Copan. So I believe that first skull was at Copan. But this skull, he said, came from the Oaxaca area. I believe it connected maybe to the Olmec. But it has, if you look, a particular bump under its nose. Remember that. We're going to return to that. A particular bump under its nose. Teeth are a little different, showing primary and secondary teeth than the Mayan skull. But Nick and I felt this was younger than the Mayan skull. Say if the Mayan skull's 1,100 years old, this skull may be 1,000 years old. They're young, ancient skulls, if you can understand that. But the eyes, the shape, very similar to the Mayan skull in design. Convinced me, same school of carvers or same area of creation or same lineage. Next slide. Now, the side is very interesting. There's that indentations you can see very clearly. You also can see, yes, there's a hole in the side, if you can see under the jaw. That hole does not go through. The hole's drilled up. I believe either crystal rods or certain things were inserted so that the skull was mounted and actually could be talking to the people. So it's a little theatrical effect. But the skull, but understand, remember those holes. We're going to return to those. Next slide. Again, the nose, the particular triangle nose. We went too far ahead. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is, then, because of the amethyst skull, it gave me the opportunity to contact Mr. Nocerino. I called him, spoke to him on the phone, told him that Francisco had brought in another skull. He, really? And I said, yes. And in fact, I want to give you another quote of Nick Nocerino, which is one of my favorites. He would always say, the more I study crystal skulls, the less I know about them. And this is why we cannot come to a definitive, as Yap said, there is no definitive consensus. I'm giving you my research, my work, my impressions, what the crystal skulls have told me. Other people will say different things. I honor all subjective experiences because you're going to see me listing these crystal skulls, the ancient skulls I work with, but you're not going to see the Mitchell-Hedges skull, which I work with, because it is not ancient. Now, you folks want to debate me about this? We can meet afterward and discuss. Except, any of you that have seen the Mitchell-Hedges skull, I honor your subjective experience because I had the same. When I saw the Mitchell-Hedges skull, tremendous energy. I saw Mayan scenes. I saw tremendous things in that skull. So I thought it was ancient, although I had a problem with the skull itself, with its carving, with its clearness, with the type of crystal it is. It's a very pure vein of quartz, only one occlusion at the top of the skull. Otherwise, as Yap said, it dissolves in water like glass. But it is not ancient. And if you want a discussion of that, we can have it off time. So here's Mr. Nocerino. I was invited him down. He came down from Pinole to the house of John Zamora in San Jose, California. And there he saw the guy. I got to meet the man. And not only did I get to meet the man, but I got to watch him work. And that's what this photograph shows. This is April of 1983, folks. And what an experience it was to watch this man work. Unbelievable what I saw him do. He immediately declared the amethyst skull as ancient, not as old as the Mayan skull, but he claimed he could see 3 great ages of the earth in this skull, of changes that have gone. We know that our planet has gone through 6 major, almost near extinctions. He saw 3 great ages in the skull. He saw 4 ages in the Mayan skull. He has seen as many as 6 ages in Shana Ra. So, what an experience it was to watch him work. And look at how he has his hands. He has his 2 fingers of a left hand on the skull, his right hand on his left hand, receiving, transmitting at the same time, maximizing the input he gets from the skull. And I watched him work, and he told me how to work with a skull, deep breathing. Marcel Vogel taught the same technique. I can easily show anybody how to do that. You can determine it on your own. It's just a matter of staccato deep breathing, and then as Marcel Vogel would say, you go into the skull. Next slide. I can show you briefly before I'm done. And again, this is with another dear friend of mine, Françoise Baudouin, who's passed on to, actually had the same age as Nick, and she had she had a store in San Jose, California. If any of you ever were there in the 80s or 90s, near Rosicrucian Park, it was called Ram Metaphysical Books. She was an amazing person, very dear to me. So that slide is very important to me. Okay, next. Okay, here's the evidence. Now, Nick Nocerino went to Lubantun in 1985. This is supposedly the site where the Mitchell-Hedges skull was found. In 1998, we attended a Crystal Skull conference that Dr. Chet Snow put on in Sedona, Arizona, where Yoki was at. And Nick was there. And Nick started to tell me then the Mitchell-Hedges skull was not ancient. And I, what? I want you to know I actually argued with him on this subject. I said, I saw scenes in it. This energy, he said, that's nothing. That's the crystal. He said, that skull has been with ancient skulls. So it's been downloaded. He said, but the skull itself is not ancient. And he went to Lubantun. He could not find a Mayan source anywhere there who knew anything about the Mitchell Hedges skull or could document that Anna Mitchell Hedges was ever there. Again, I'm not going to go into detail about that. It's kind of negative. So, but I just wanted to point out that he was there and did the investigation. 1999, he convinced me, further in 2000, that the Mitchell Hedges skull was not ancient. There's his, though, Shana Ra. Well, now, Michelle will follow, and she'll give a definition and talk about it. But I first got to see Shana Ra in 1998. No doubt it was an ancient artifact to me as an archaeologist. It still had the dirt and grit embedded in it. It was no doubt it had just recently come out of the ground. And again, here's this idea of provenance. Nick Nocerino was asked to be a psychic advisor on an excavation in Oaxaca area of Mexico in 1995. Now again, this is not a documented excavation. Any archaeologists, anthropologists, and I know there's one from the Smithsonian in the audience, who I very much want to meet before this is over. You know that if you say it's a not documented excavation, then it's not legitimate. But he told them where to dig. He told them they would find several crystal skulls and Mayan artifacts. They dug to exactly the point he said, and there was Shana Ra. And Shana Ra was given to Mr. Nocerino. So we have provenance on it, but we don't have provenance on it, if you understand. But when I saw it, there was no doubt it's an ancient artifact. I cannot even begin to tell you the age of Shana Ra. I wouldn't even venture. At least 5,000 years. Shana Ra was a record keeper, a healer, tremendous amount of energy in Shana Ra. You'll experience Shana Ra. Shana Ra is working on all of you now. Shana Ra loves to gather with the skulls. And Nick was the one, and I must say this publicly, Nick has told me within this last year and before how proud he is of his beautiful and wonderful daughter, Michelle. She continues his legacy and honors his name and his tradition and his work. And believe me, that's what I will do to the last breath I take on this planet, because he was one of the greatest teachers I ever had. So Shana Ra is amazing. Shana Ra is not pretty. Shana Ra is not ugly. Now, how can we tell it's not machined? If a crystal skull is machined, it exhibits what we call bilateral symmetry, meaning one side of the face is exactly the same as the other side of the face. If any of you are machinists, if any of you have worked as engineers, you know how they do it now. You said a computer program, it guides a tool, it will make a tool, make a carving. Oh my God. And then it will come out the other side exactly the same. Look at your human face in the mirror. One eye is not the same as the other eye. One cheek is lower than the other. One ear is not the same. We are not bilaterally symmetrical. That's how you tell them the skull is machined. It's modern. The ancient ones are not bilaterally symmetrical. Okay, let's go. We gotta go fast now. Here's Max. Max is not here. Max is here in spirit. Max is always where the ancient skulls are. Max is very, very ancient. It's called the Texas Scroll, owned by Joanne Parks. She goes around with you. All have the opportunity to see Max. She comes all around the country. Max is very, very old. Very, very old. Next. Here's Max and Shana Ra together. Picture was taken in 2006 in France. Now, they're not modern skulls. They're not carved aesthetically. They're not for beauty. In fact, we have transposed an image of an ancient hominid, who we call Homo erectus, on top of Shana Ra, and that's who Shana Ra is, an ancient hominid. Now, what does that mean? Did the people that carved this skull, did they know of that? That makes people think it's modern, because we supposedly only have known about Homo erectus in the last 200 years. Well, they may have known about Homo erectus 10,000 years ago, because that skull represents a hominid, an early human species. Next. I got to move quickly. Here's the British Museum test. In 1995, the British Museum called it testing. They called Dr. Jane Walsh from the Smithsonian came, if I could point, you see the large skull in the middle, that is the Smithsonian skull. There's a skull to the side of it down here. Very good. That's an Aztec skull that they knew about. Okay. Then you have Shana Ra, and you have Max. And you have what's known as the reliquary skull, which was done, we know, in the Middle Ages. Okay, they did their testing, cast molding. Now, Mr. Nocerino, very important point. Mr. Nocerino would only come to London to the British Museum if he was given a promise that all the testing that was done on Shana Ra, he would get written reports on. 1996. The Nocerino family is still waiting for those reports today. Let me tell you what happened. They tested them. They came back and announced their skulls were fake. The Smithsonian was modern carved. The Aztec skull was modern carved. The reliquary skull was modern carved. They found, again, electron scanning microscope, tool marks. But when it came to Max and Shana Ra, and Joanne Parks loves to say this in presentation, they had no comment. Now, is that a scientific conclusion? It's either yay or nay, right? No comment? Oh, then they said they had the tests fouled up. It didn't work right. Well, then comes Dr. Jane Walsh in 2005 and publishes an article in the Washington Post where she says all the skulls were tested, including Max, and they're all fake. That is a lie. The Smithsonian has never tested Max. Dr. Jane Walsh never tested Max. And if she had not said that, I would not have any problem with her, because their skulls were tested and were fake. They could say they're not ancient. But when she said all the skulls are fake, she lost her scientific credibility. Next. Okay, there is Madre. These are the skulls by the walkers that you're going to hear about. Madre, Rainbow, and Czar. Great skulls, powerful skulls, all ancient skulls. You'll feel the energy, and you'll get a great presentation. Dale gives a great presentation. Dale was one of the most venerated students of Mr. Nocerino, wrote his own book, The Crystal Book, which is a seminal book in the field, and has been a great teacher of metaphysics and crystals, even before he met Nick, but since he met Nick and became one of his students. And we're also honored, and I told her I was going to call her out, in the audience is Sandra Bowen, and we're honored that she's here. She was one of the first great researchers with Nick on crystals. She actually had a license plate in the 90s which said the Crystal Lady, and she is here, and she was part of the team that Mr. Nocerino took to Canada to test the Mitchell Hedges skull. And she was the first person that interviewed me. In the book that's called Mysteries of Crystal Skulls, Mr. Nocerino and Sandra were co-authors of, she came to interview me in 1986. She should be recognized. Okay, next page, next. Okay, I'm gonna have to move quickly. This is Nefertiti, the skull that Dale will talk about. I'm fascinated by Nefertiti. Saw it for the first time last year. There's no way that this is modern carved. You'll see that skull, you'll understand. It still has part of the crude stone. This is an amethyst, but it still has part of the crude stone that wasn't formed with amethyst on the side. There's no way anybody's gonna carve something like that to sell, because nobody would buy it. It's got the crude stone still on it. Because they chose that piece of crystal to make this skull powerful shamanic object. Okay, let's move on. And there's Einstein. Let's do Einstein quickly. Carolyn Ford will give you much more detail about Einstein, but I have to point out things because I was fortunate enough to go in March to visit Carolyn and her husband Ron, spend time with Einstein and test Einstein. There's no doubt that Einstein is what Mr. Nocerino called a master skull. What does that mean? Look at Einstein. Einstein has the same indentations on the side. Einstein has much more sophisticated teeth than the Mayan skull, but they're carved the same way, carved or created the same way. Einstein has the bump under his nose that the amethyst skull has. So I did the testing of Einstein. I have an article about it. It was in Ventures in the World Explorer magazine. I did both sides. I tested it as an archaeologist, as an artifact, and then I went into meditation with it. Einstein showed me a scene. He showed me a scene in ancient times. He showed me a powerful shaman who was male carrying Einstein into a cave, placing him on a stone altar, and then gathering 12 disciples, male and female, and gave those 12 disciples an assignment: create a copy of Einstein. 12 copy of Einstein. I am convinced, because Einstein told me so, the Mayan skull, the amethyst skull, are one of Einstein's children that were carved then. These are what we call a master skull. A master skull is a very powerful skull that gathers 12 around it. This is where the 13 is sacred to the Maya. 13 was sacred to the ancient Egyptians. It's only in modern times that 13 is unlucky, and that's because of October 13, 1307, when the Knights Templars were attacked by the Catholic Church and the King of France. That's the only reason we come with 13 being unlucky. It's a sacred number. It's a number of transformation. It's a number of Osiris. It's a number of transformation, of resurrection. So we see sets of 13. That's what I'm telling you I see. Sets of 13. If you have a bunch of skulls, create your own sets. One master in the middle with 12 around it. And that's what's going to be fed from all of us here. That's what we see as it. Let's keep going. There again, wanted to point out the side. The side of Einstein has holes which are drilled straight through the crystal, different than the amethyst skull, much more sophisticated. I see ropes. I see some type of hanging that was put on Einstein where he was hung up for everybody to see. 33 pounds of him for everyone to see. Far and away, Einstein is the oldest. Unfortunately, Joanne Parks is upset about that because Max had the title before as the largest ancient crystal skull at 18 pounds. Einstein is 33 pounds. Incredible mother piece. You have to think of a mother stone that at least weighed 100 pounds to get down to Einstein. And I'm not going to say that Einstein was carved because Carolyn has a different idea. And I'm not going to ever go against the keepers, the guardians of Chesterstovian. As you will learn, the guardians are going to follow me. They are all very special people. As you're going to know, the ancient skulls choose their keepers, not the other way around. So each one of the guardians that's going to come up here are very special people with a very special message. Okay, I just wanted to compare the two. This is the last slide, where you can see the Mayan skull is a child of Einstein, no doubt about it. And the master skulls have their 12 children. They've all been called. Einstein told me in March, he said, you will see many more ancient skulls at this conference because I have put out the call. He is very proud of Carolyn. He stayed 20 years in silence to see what she would do. Did she have money in her eyes? Did she want to make profit? Did she want to use him to exploit? She did not. And Mr. Nocerino told me about Einstein for many years. He told me about Einstein in the 90s. She's going to tell you he saw Einstein in 1992. But he would never tell me anything detailed about it. He would say, Einstein is special. The skulls do this, but Einstein is special. There's Einstein, which is a special case. He led me to believe that he had Einstein and just didn't want to show it to me. Mr. Nocerino was OSS in World War II. He was Navy intelligence. He actually had CIA contacts. That's a whole other story. Michelle can get into more detail about that. But if he gave you his word, you can be sure it was kept. He told Carolyn he would never reveal her identity and never said where Einstein came from. Until his passing breath, he did not. So now I know what he meant about Einstein, a master skull. Okay, that's good. We should be done. Okay, I'm wrapping up because I want to keep on point for our keepers that are coming. So what is the message of the crystal skulls? Occupy your mind. As we said in the 60s, free your mind and your ass will follow. So the gathering is here is the overwhelming message you're going to get from everyone here, starting with our beloved grandmother, Flor de Mayo, who set the sacred space for us. Curandera Suprema. She set the sacred space. The overwhelming message you're going to leave is from love and for understanding. This is why I say there are no aliens. We are the aliens. We are the extraterrestrial star seeds. Every indigenous culture teaches we are star seeds. And we are all brothers and sisters on the same train. We are all riding a beloved spaceship, Mother Earth. All the indigenous people have come to tell us it is time for us Western people to let go these destructive ways, to venerate our planet again, to be in harmony with the ancient people, because that's the only way we go on. We are coming to the end of many, many cycles now, and we all chose to be here. Understand that. Whatever problems are in your life, your financial, your relationships, your finances, your economics, all the stresses, all the pain we all go through is all ego. It's all the lesson to understand why we're here. But we are here because we chose to be here now. We are all part of it. We're all the crystal skulls. They're all in each of you. You will all be very different when this weekend is over. I saw that last year. People have been writing to me since 1010 saying the event changed their life forever. And so this is it. This is why we're here. We have to do this together or we don't do it at all. We're all in this. And the skulls, people say, well, if you're spiritually aware, you don't need a crystal skull. You should be able to do it by yourself. But we are the tool-making species. We created these things to aid us in our journey. The crystal skulls are incredible tools. Incredible tools. Use them. Own them. The time is now. Thank you all for listening to me speak.
Stephen Mehler, as always, very passionate.